Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bianca Smith-Meyer, and this is Politico Live. I am the FinTech correspondent and macroeconomic policy reporter at Politico, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to the 7th Annual Finance Summit here in Paris. It is a hybrid event, so we have some wonderful faces in the room, I'm very happy to say, but also to all of the online community that are coming to us online, I salute you and welcome you. It's been a hell of a couple of years. I think that everyone can agree with that. But in some ways, not to dampen the mood, but I feel like we're jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. Not only do we face rising prices, but there's also the threat of climate change just around the corner. And of course, the tech revolution continues to threaten to upend the financial industry. So there's a lot to get into, and we will get into all of that over the next couple of days, and I look forward to discussing that with you all and my colleagues here and in London. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment just to thank our presenting partners, Generali and MasterCard, for making this event possible. And then a couple of housekeeping rules. Also for the online attendees, you can ask questions and then get involved with our polls through the Swap Card platform. The instructions are there on the online website, on the event website, and for people in the room, you should be sitting on them or have them in your hand. You can, in any case, feel free to chat with your fellow attendees online if you're already in the platform and ask questions right underneath the screen of the desktop. For those that are really tech savvy and on their iPhones, you can just look underneath the screen and you will also find all of the items that you're looking for. We want to make this event as interactive as possible, so please do submit your questions, and also don't hesitate to tweet using the hashtag PoliticoFS. Now, to our main event, it gives me great pleasure to have two heavyweights, one in the room and one tuning in from Brussels. I'd love you all to give a warm round of applause to the Governor of the Banque de France, François Villeroy de Galhau, and online, Paolo Gentiloni, the Commissioner for the Economy. Welcome.
Bonjour.
And thanks so much for being here. I want to first jump over to Brussels, if I may. The Commissioner has only recently just finished his winter forecast, and obviously that's then created some news in the forecasts that obviously keep changing. And Commissioner, you must have a tough job in the sense that these forecasts do keep changing. But I understand that from today's message that the outlook is generally good, right?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Bianca and Politico, for this meeting. And bonjour, François.
Buongiorno, Paolo.
We, of course, we know that we are coming from a last quarter of 21, and we are still in a period of the recovery losing momentum. But overall, our forecast remain quite positive, and we estimate a level of growth of 4% for this year, which is, for the European standard, quite high and near to the global level of growth that we consider. So good news for growth, risks quite balanced, upside and downside, but of course, risk to the upside for inflation. And this is something that we have to keep in mind when we give this overall positive assessment on the perspective of growth for the European Union.
Great, yeah, thanks. So as you mentioned, 4% for the Eurozone in 2022, and then 2.7% in growth for 2023. I'm just curious, and forgive the answer to some extent, but did you price in the risk of war in Ukraine as part of this?
Well, this is really, Björk, a risk of a different degree, honestly. Because yes, we consider supply chains bottlenecks, we consider energy prices, we consider shortage of labor and different factors, the monetary policy decisions, different elements are factored in our estimate. But of course, if the geopolitical tension for the buildup around Ukraine is destined to grow and to produce consequences, this will be something quite different from what we call downside risk to an economic forecast. And so give diplomacy a chance and prepare a united reaction in Europe if this diplomatic track is not successful.
Yeah, let's hope for the best there. Governor, I turn to you. The winter forecast today, when it comes to inflation, says that we'll hit 3.5% this year, but we'll reach 1.7% next year. I mean, is that in line with your expectations as well?
Perhaps, Bjarke, two very quick comments, because Paolo is the man of the day, but I will only add two comments. One on growth. We happen to have the same figure for French growth this year, 3.6%. But I would say, Paolo, that we will update our figure in March. I would say today at least 3.6% in France, because we have good results for the first quarter, better than expected. We published our monthly survey this morning. On inflation, which is your core question, obviously, as Paolo said, there is much uncertainty. The figures happen to be not very different from our December figures. We will update them in the ECB in March also. But I would say a very simple message. Increased uncertainty requires increased optionality in our monetary policy. And this is what we stressed in our Governing Council last week and what we will implement in the next month.
I mean, it is a big drop to go from 3.5% to 1.7%. I mean, whether we journalists have misunderstood it or not, but we understood the Governing Council's last meeting as somewhat of a hawkish turn. I mean, doesn't the drop in inflation expectations suggest that we should keep rates low all the time, and then also keep the bond buying programs full speed and powered through?
Bjarke, you know, life is very simple. We happen to have our next Governing Council in March. And this is the information I will give today on March the 9th and the 10th. We will then update our forecast. And believe me, 1 month is important. Because as the Commissioner said, we can have developments on the energy front, on the geopolitical front. So our figure will be still better in 1 month. And then we will decide.
But I mean,
as I said, optionality.
Okay. But I mean, there has been some confusion. I mean, the ECB chief economist, Philip Lane, was talking about how overall the risk of undershooting the 2% target was higher than overshooting it. I mean, what is the bigger risk in your mind?
Sorry to repeat this word optionality,
okay,
but it's not an empty word. Let me precise somewhat.
Okay.
It's clear that we will have a sequencing in the gradual normalization of our monetary policy. We are going closer towards our target of 2%, and this is good news. There is at present an inflation hump. Everybody sees it, due mainly to energy. But the sequencing of the gradual normalization will be the following. A, tapering, so stopping the net purchases, not only on the PEP, which we decide for March, but on the APP. Second, rate hikes. And third, eventually, end of reinvestment, so downsizing of the balance sheet. The direction is very clear. The pace along this sequencing is completely open and data dependent. This is what we mean by optionality. And it would be a mistake in such uncertain time to make premature decisions. So Christine Lagarde indicated last week the direction of the journey, but we will determine the pace starting in March.
And do you have any particular preferences for the pace?
I will tell you next month.
Okay, all right. To what pace?
No, Bjarke, let me be extremely clear and serious about that. It's not the usual caution of a central banker. It's the pragmatism of the situation we are in. If we decide too much in advance with so many uncertainties mentioned by Paolo, it would be a professional mistake.
No, but I mean, it's a good point. And as the commissioner did mention that there are upside risks to the inflation forecast, but I mean, can you imagine it continuing to skyrocket past the summer?
No, we think it's a hump. We think inflation will step down in the coming quarters, let's say, due to energy prices, due also to an easing of supply chain problems, which is another element. By the way, in our monthly survey this morning, we asked French entrepreneurs for the first time what they thought about the length of the supply chain problem. The answer is very interesting. Most of them expect them to end in the year to come. Most of them. Mm-hmm. Few of them expect the supply chains to disappear in the next 3 months. But it gives you more or less an indication about the hump. But frankly, the most important question mark is about energy prices. So we will see.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we look also at core inflation. We must take into consideration what happens not only on headline, which is influenced by energy, but on core inflation. As you are aware, I didn't look, by the way, at the Commission forecast, but as you are aware, the last figure for the euro area is 2.3. So very different from headline at 5.1, and very different, by the way, from the US figures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it means that we have probably the same direction as the US, welcome normalization. We could have a significantly different pace because we are in a different situation.
Yeah, for sure. If given the fact that you missed the winter forecast, you can always go on to politico.eu. They're up there if you want to have a quick look. I'm going to move into a slightly different topic here. Commissioner, you are currently preparing a fiscal guidance for EU countries for 2023. We understand that you'll be pretty lenient on in highly indebted countries. Could you just explain the Commission's thinking a little bit?
Indeed, we are still discussing the issue. As you know, there was a paper circulating, I think, in Politico.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Yeah.
Yes. But in my political experience, I've learned 3 things. First, that journalists are doing their job. It's okay. Second, that you should not comment on drafts that are circulating. And third, and mostly, you should not be influenced by drafts that are published, because indeed we are still in a preliminary phase. What should we address? Well, of course, we should address a very uncertain situation, as François just stressed, a situation where the challenge of the climate transition with this situation of climbing energy prices, which is, by the way, by large, the main factor of inflation in Europe, quite differently from US. US, you have a consumer inflation. Here, you have energy inflation, which was at minus 4% in January 2021 and is at plus 28% in January 22, from minus 4 to 28, the energy inflation. And so all our forecast is based on the fact that in the last part of this year, this increase will begin to slow down. And this is justifying what, indeed, as you were saying, could appear surprising, that you are going from a 3.6% to a below 2% in 23. But the reason is that the forecast is of this decrease of energy prices at a certain time this year. So we have to address with our fiscal guidances a situation where uncertainty is still there, the climate transition challenges are quite strong, and we should prevent the risk of declining in strategic investment, repeating the experience that we had after the financial crisis, but at the same time beginning to have a more targeted forms of support in our economies, because of course we are no more in a situation where a broad supportive fiscal stance is justified. So we have to find a balance, knowing also that these fiscal guidances will be very useful for governments because of the fact that at the end of this year, we will probably deactivate this general escape clause. And so governments need to have clarity on our fiscal framework, knowing that the general escape clause will not be there next year.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Governor, I want to get your take on the fiscal rules. I mean, as Gentiloni just mentioned, they're supposed to be somewhat reintroduced from 2023, but obviously we don't want to run in or create a risk of cliff edges. Now, I'm just curious, what's your general take on the fiscal rules? I mean, do you think that they're fit for purpose?
First, it's up to political leaders and not to central bankers to decide about fiscal rules. And I wish Paolo good luck. Or to say it in Italian, in bocca al lupo, because it won't be that easy. And it's really a good thing that it relies on political decision and not in our hands. My guess is that it will take some time, and perhaps let's wait after the French elections. Having said that, my personal feeling, and this would be probably the feeling of most governors, is three simple thoughts. First, we need rules. And I stress it, there is a debate, including in this country, would it be better to have discretion or to rely on institutions? I think we need rules, especially in France. It helps for our fiscal discipline. I cannot imagine French fiscal policy without European rules. Second, we need rules which are more simple and more effective than today, because they are complex. I don't know how many pages exactly is it for the Stability and Growth Pact, and unfortunately they are not very credible. And third, my feeling, I guess that the Commission is quite close to that, is that rules on expenditures are probably the most efficient one, rather than rules on the structural deficit, and we all know that structural deficits are very complicated to calculate and still more to explain to our fellow citizens. So these are my three convictions, so to say. There are two open questions. First, the question of quality of expenditures, which Paolo mentioned with investment, but it's a very difficult question. How can we incorporate a discussion on the quality without being too lax? And second, if I had a wish or a dream for the European outcome, I guess Paolo has probably the same dream. It would be a political agreement, so to say, converging with strong national fiscal rules and a central common fiscal capacity. This could be a good political balance, but this is only a wish. I hope it's not a dream, but it's a wish.
We can always wish. But I definitely want to get back to the fiscal capacity in a second. But Commissioner, you, at the end of December, closed a consultation into how the rules should be then amended. I mean, these have not become public yet. I understand that the plan is within the Commission to release these, well, a general summary of what the views were. I mean, can you give us a sense of where the direction of travel is heading?
Well, if you mean the public consultation,
yeah.
Of course, the public consultation was addressing different issues with very different point of views. Maybe interesting to note that the final wish or dream François mentioned was indeed a point raised by a few very important institutions, because I don't know if it's a coincidence, but it is quite obvious the reason. It is the completion of our union from a monetary and fiscal point of view, that the ECB, the IMF, and the OECD, in their contribution to the consultation, all the three were stressing the need of a central fiscal capacity. Well, will we have this kind of proposals from the Commission? Well, the discussion is too preliminary to enter into this. I think the timing is indeed that a proposal from the Commission is needed for the leaders to discuss, and this proposal could come in the last couple of months of this semester, so in May or in June, probably. And the issues to address were